Many young men and women have a natural desire to build up their bodies. Exceptional muscular development turns heads and gets one noticed. Among males, having larger than average size muscles can impart an aura of intimidation, i.e., if a well-built adversary presents himself, one knows that it will require more energy than perhaps one's own muscles possess to overpower or out-endure him. A larger muscle is a more powerful muscle, and one that will typically function for longer periods of time than a smaller muscle, due to the fact that it has more energy, glycogen, stored inside of it. Consequently, the desire to have bigger muscles runs very high among males, particularly when in their prime years of 16 to 28, as those are the years in which they are most ready to compete for mates. Taking advantage of this almost universal desire among young males, bodybuilding influencers will typically enter the picture and can easily lead these young men astray, as these online entrepreneurs' sole existence is predicated on selling products, not necessarily on dispensing valid scientific training and nutritional advice. I recently clicked on a link sent to me by a client, which took me to a page that revealed the arm routine of Arnold Schwarzenegger, aka the Austrian Oak. Now, Schwarzenegger has been the poster boy for professional bodybuilding and supplement sales for over 40 years, since the mid-1970s, and he certainly did sport a freakishly large pair of arms. His biceps in particular were, and still are, something of a legend within the bodybuilding community. And so, many young men desiring to increase the size of their arm muscles often try to follow the methods that Schwarzenegger employed. His biceps workout, according to the article, was as follows: barbell curl, 7 sets of 8 reps. Seated dumbbell curls, 7 sets of 8 reps. Concentration curls, 7 sets of 12 reps. And this represents only the volume of exercise that Schwarzenegger performed for his biceps. According to the same article, which was written by Arnold's good friend Albert Busick and published in Iron Man magazine in 1967, the Austrian Oak also dedicated a similar volume of exercise to target his triceps muscles, located on the back of the upper arms. Narrow grip bench presses, 7 sets of 8 reps. Lying barbell triceps presses, 7 sets of 8 reps. Dumbbell French presses, 7 sets of 10 reps. Triceps press downs, 7 sets of 10 reps. Schwarzenegger's prescription then for building bigger arms was to perform 21 sets for biceps and 28 sets for triceps 3 times a week, for a weekly total of 147 sets of direct arm training. So there you have it, the exercises, sets, and reps of, quote, bodybuilding's king of kings, close quote. This rather immodest moniker Schwarzenegger himself had coined and featured in one of his magazine ads to advertise his training courses back in the early 1980s. And of course, since Schwarzenegger didn't just possess oversized arms, but also equally as prosperous muscles in his chest, back, shoulders, and legs, he recommended training the rest of one's muscle groups with a comparable amount of sets and repetitions over the course of a 7-day period. Indeed, such workouts were what Schwarzenegger claimed to have employed in training to win his various Mr. Olympia titles. Again, according to the article, Arnold was training 7 times a week, working out for 5 to 6 hours a day. All of this adds up to between 35 and 42 hours of time spent each week in the gym. From a practical standpoint, I don't know of anyone who has or can afford that kind of leisure time to devote to building up inordinately large muscles. More importantly, is that volume of resistance training really necessary in order for one to build bigger and stronger arms? Interestingly, there was a study that explored just such a question. The study examined the results of 2 groups of resistance exercise trainees. The first group trained only with compound, multiple muscle groups involved simultaneously, movements such as bench press, lat pull-downs, dumbbell incline presses, and dumbbell one-arm rows. The second group performed these same exercises but also added into their weekly training additional exercises for the biceps and triceps. According to the researchers, quote, There were no significant differences between the groups in the percentage change before and after training. The findings of this study suggest that isolation exercises are not necessary in order to increase compound movement strength or increase upper arm girth. These findings also suggest that strength coaches can save time by not including isolation exercise and still achieve increases in strength and size." Close quote. 13 years after this study, in 2013, another study was performed that also revealed that the inclusion of single-joint exercises in a multi-joint exercise training program resulted in no additional benefits in terms of muscle size or strength gains in untrained young men. The researchers concluded, quote, "This study showed that the inclusion of single-joint exercises in a multi-joint exercise training program resulted in no additional benefits in terms of muscle size or strength gains in untrained young men." Close quote. In 2015, yet another study, published in Applied Physiology, Nutrition, and Metabolism, reported the same thing, this time among subjects with at least 2 years of training history, causing the researchers to state, quote, "In conclusion, 8 weeks of resistance training involving multiple joint or multiple joint plus single joint resulted in similar alterations in muscle strength and size in trained participants. Therefore, the addition of single joint exercises to a resistance training program involving multiple joint exercises does not seem to promote additional benefits to trained men, suggesting multi-joint only resistance training to be a time-efficient approach." Close quote. This is interesting to note when certain authorities within the fitness industry attempt to criticize Mike Mentzer's consolidation program from his book Heavy Duty 2, Mind and Body, which is entirely made up of compound exercises, as being somehow inadequate to stimulate strength and size increases, and that isolation exercises or single joint movements should be added to it. The truth is that no research studies have ever shown that single-joint exercises are needed or will develop more arm muscle in a routine that already has multi-joint exercises that involve the biceps and triceps. In other words, if one's exercise program already contains exercises that involve the biceps and triceps muscles, such as bench presses, pull-downs, incline presses, and rows do, the addition of exercises that solely target the muscle of the upper arms would appear to be superfluous. You stimulated all of the upper arm musculature into growth that could be stimulated by performing the compound exercises. To therefore opt to spend more time exercising your arms when doing so will not result in any additional arm growth would appear to be time lost, which is time never to be recovered. Even more intriguing is the fact that there is some evidence in the science literature that you may not need to perform any compound work for the upper body at all in order to make your arms bigger, so long as you are training large muscle groups like legs. This sounds bizarre, I know, so let me explain. Mike Mentzer had said long ago that, quote, "When growth in any muscle is stimulated, growth is also stimulated, though to a lesser degree, in the rest of the body. This indirect effect seems to be proportional to the size of the muscle being worked. To get the most out of your arm training, for example, it's logical to train your legs as hard as possible, since, being the largest muscles in the body, their growth will have the greatest effect on stimulating growth indirectly in the rest of the body." Close quote. Interestingly, a science study lends support to Mike's contention. The study, which appeared in the Scandinavian Journal of Medical Science and Sports in 1991, examined muscle development and hormonal changes in subjects in 2 different groups. In the first group, subjects engaged only in arm exercises. In the second group, subjects engaged in both arm exercises and leg exercises. Though there was observed no change in resting hormonal levels, they observed significantly higher levels of cortisol and testosterone in the second group while they were working out, and no change in the first group. After several weeks, the second group improved their arm strength by an average of 37%, while the first group achieved only a 9% improvement. It was immediately assumed that training legs results in a release of testosterone that helps develop muscles throughout your body. This may be true, but the legs, of course, don't have a monopoly on this effect. Whenever you perform compound exercises that engage lots of muscles, your body starts to produce these hormones. So you'll get this benefit whether you're doing deadlifts, bench press, squats, or whatever else. But it does underscore this indirect effect of exercise. So, the data would strongly suggest that bodybuilding's king of kings didn't need to perform nearly so much exercise as he did in order to develop his royal arms. Again, as Mike pointed out, a good portion of Mr. Schwarzenegger's physique was not the end result of his training methods. He had something when he started his bodybuilding training that the average person doesn't: exceptional genetics for building muscle. Indeed, photographs of Schwarzenegger taken when he was a teenager in the Bavarian Alps reveal a level of muscular development far beyond what most people could attain even after years of resistance training. Similarly, the late Steve Reeves, the last of the great pre-steroid era bodybuilders, and a man who carved out an incredibly successful film career for himself during the late 1950s and early 1960s, largely, if not solely, as a result of his impressive physique, stated that,
"It could be inherited from my father. He was my height and my weight and my build that I am today without ever working out. Of course, when I was championship form, that was in addition to my genetics."
As with all things that have a genetic component, there are reasons why the average person's muscle tissue typically exhibits a very limited growth capacity. First, if muscles were able to grow rapidly, a person's movement potential would become compromised, as the angle of pull of a muscle across two joints would change dramatically, and not necessarily for the better. Second, a bigger muscle requires more energy to sustain it, which could be disastrous for a species such as ours, which has struggled for centuries to pull enough energy, calories, out of its environment to survive. For this reason, a governor of sorts evolved into our genes to regulate the growth of our muscles. As Dr. Doug McGuff, the co-author of the book Body by Science, explained in a video on his YouTube channel entitled Hypertrophy is a Side Effect.
But make no mistake that hypertrophy is tolerated as a side effect by your body. It is not a goal, it is not a primary purpose. And hypertrophy is heavily negatively regulated for multiple reasons. One is just the metabolic expense of skeletal muscle. Myostatin is a protein encoded by a gene, GDF8, that puts a limiter or a ceiling on how much muscle hypertrophy you can have. And if you remove that governor in an animal, you will have a massively muscled animal, like a bully whippet. You can Google the term Wendy, the bully whippet, and look at what these animals look like who have never lifted a weight a day in their life. Also, there's the issue, if the muscle becomes too big, then you have a problem with diffusion of nutrients into the muscle and diffusions of waste products out of the muscle. So there are multiple different reasons why a muscle can be negatively regulated in terms of the degree of hypertrophy that you can have. And for the people that are still going to maintain that a training style will dictate higher levels of hypertrophy, I would like to offer you the example out of the book Pumping Iron, where it describes Arnold checking his calf, the best calf in the sport, in the mirror of Gold's Gym, while in the other corner of Gold's Gym, Bill Grant, another bodybuilder, is doing set after set after set of calf raises and cannot get his calves to budge. So Bill Grant in the 1970s was a bodybuilder that was known for having the best biceps in the business, but using the same training protocol that he used to produce the very best biceps in the business, could not produce calves to save himself. And it's the same protocol in the same person. So hypertrophy can be negatively regulated in one muscle group within one person, and there's not a thing that you can do about it. And you have to understand that for the vast, vast majority of the population, their entire body is like Bill Grant's calves. Did Bill Grant's calves get bigger as a result of his training? Probably so. Did they look better? Probably so. Were they ever impressive? No, they absolutely weren't. And that's true for most people throughout their body. So we have to understand that we resistance train in the best way that we know how, and the hypertrophy that we get is what we're going to get, and that's that. Because to our body, hypertrophy is an undesired side effect that's heavily negatively regulated. So in my opinion, the best thing to do is train hard, train brief, train smart, don't get injured. As long as you're doing those things, you're doing everything that you can do.
So as you can see, nature is very stingy and random in doling out her gifts, but that's the way it has to be. We can't all be champions. We can't all be Albert Einsteins. Somebody has to take out the garbage, let's face it. Only those who possess an abundance of the required physical and inherited traits can ever hope to develop to the Mr. Olympia level. Every area of human endeavor, not just bodybuilding, every area, academics, basketball, any other kind of sport especially, stands out with a few really top-level competitors. And again, this is as it must be. Nature is very, very random and stingy in doling out these gifts to people. Surprisingly, however, I see quite a few physical types around the country at my various seminars and exhibitions who seem to possess a tremendous amount of physical potential. Many more than achieve a great deal of success in bodybuilding, that's for sure. Why is this? Why are there so many not great, but why are there so many individuals with great potential, and yet there are so few who develop or fulfill that potential? I think the reason is simply psychological factors. If you were given 100,000 normal adult males, you might be lucky to find 20 with a physical potential to become Mr. Olympias. From those 20 thoroughbreds, you might call them, maybe 10 would possess the necessary drive and ambition to fulfill those potentials. And of those 10, you'd be lucky to find 2 who had the intelligence as well to know how to train and diet to fulfill their ultimate potentials. Do you see now how the odds of developing a top physique are actually stacked against you?
An interesting study indicating the supreme role of genetics in influencing one's response to bodybuilding exercise was conducted by Van Etten et al. In this study, 2 groups, one already muscular or mesomorphic, the other thin or ectomorphic, were each placed on an identical exercise program for 12 weeks, and the results were closely monitored. At the completion of the study, it was discovered that the mesomorphic group experienced significant gains in muscle mass, while the ectomorphic group experienced no significant improvement at all. Therefore, those who are inordinately muscular to begin with will gain size and strength from their bodybuilding efforts to a much greater extent than those who are not naturally muscular or mesomorphic. Of course, the bodybuilding industry ignores this, as they've long realized that the reality in such matters dramatically impedes commerce. And once one has accepted the fact that there are some genetic facts that cannot be changed, the training angst that many suffer will disappear, and one no longer will become frustrated or surprised at the modest muscular results that one's bodybuilding efforts might bring forth. The best analogy I can find to put this situation into context is the following. Instead of humans, think of another animal species, let's say horses. Within this species, there exists considerable genetic differentiation, and yet, despite this great differentiation, there is also the commonality of the species. They are horses after all. One sect of this differentiation is the quarter horse, which is an average-size horse. Another is the Clydesdale, which is a truly massive horse renowned for its power and physique. Now let us imagine a scenario whereby a large portion of young male quarter horses desire to become bigger horses. They aren't fully grown yet, but in looking at the adult quarter horses, they see only average-sized animals, only slightly bigger than themselves. Then one day they see a Clydesdale, and their world changes. That's what they want to look like. To their delight, they discover that there is a magazine that specializes on the activities of Clydesdale horses called, let's say, Big Horse Monthly. Inside the pages of this publication are featured pictures exclusively of Clydesdales. And, seeing as there is $1 to be made, certain of the Clydesdales, along with the publisher of the magazine, recognize that a large enough segment of the quarter horse community really wants to become big like Clydesdales are. So, Within the pages of the magazine, they sell special foodstuffs, oats, that the Clydesdale eats, and also sell exercise programs that the Clydesdale claim resulted in making them bigger and stronger. The young quarter horses might well think to themselves, wow, those Clydesdales weren't always that big, and yet look at them now. I'm going to purchase one of those courses and their special brand of oats so that I can become big and strong like them. So he purchases a particular Clydesdales training course, and when that doesn't give him the results he wants, he buys another course from another Clydesdale featured in the magazine. He reads that one particular Clydesdale eats a lot of oats and pulls beer wagons around several days a week. Eureka, thinks the quarter horse. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start eating a lot of oats and pull beer wagons around so I can look like him. So he eats more oats than he needs and does his best to pull around beer wagons. After a month of this, he is fatter from eating more than his physiology requires, and his joints ache and his muscles are inflamed from doing too much work for his physiology. And, worst of all, to him, he still looks like a quarter horse and not a Clydesdale. Of course, the reason why he couldn't pull off the transformation isn't a lack of willingness to train hard or to eat what he thinks is required, but rather the simple fact that he doesn't possess the genetic disposition that makes a Clydesdale a Clydesdale. And so it is with young human males who subscribe to muscle magazines, follow genetically gifted vloggers, and look at pictures of bodybuilders that have a greater genetic predisposition for growing larger muscles than they do. They are free to copy what the bodybuilders do in terms of training and duplicating what they eat. But those bodybuilders will always be the Clydesdales of our species, and the young men will always be the quarter horses. And this will remain the case no matter how much time and money they invest in training equipment, or nutritional programs. As touched upon earlier, genetics is an area that the bodybuilding industry doesn't really talk much about because there's no return on it. False implications go a long way in bodybuilding, as all training courses and supplement sales are predicated on the belief that the results of the genetically exceptional can be yours by purchasing such products. Within the pages, both online and print, of these same muscle magazines, those seeking to build bigger muscles will not only find articles allegedly written by certain champion bodybuilders detailing how they trained in order to develop their muscles, but also, in page after page, the young readers will be inundated with a barrage of subtle and not-so-subtle advertisements for various powders and pills to maximize whatever growth their gym sessions might be stimulating. Of course, the magazines seldom tell their young readers that champion bodybuilders also take growth hormones and anabolic steroid drugs to make their muscles grow to such large proportions. They also seldom mention the damage such long-term ingestion of these anabolic agents can have on the hearts, livers, and endocrine systems of those who abuse such drugs over a long period of time. And why would they lower themselves to report on the health hazards of such drugs? Particularly when they aren't in the health business, they're in the supplement business. As far as they're concerned, your health is your concern, not theirs. Caveat emptor. Joe Weider, who brought Arnold Schwarzenegger to America and used him as his pitchman to convince the bodybuilding world that Arnold built his size by using Weider supplements, downplayed the role of steroids in creating Arnold's physique, telling the Los Angeles Times that they may have added perhaps 10%. How far off was Joe in his estimation? Well, according to a study that appeared in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1996, Joe missed the side of the barn by about 300%. The study randomly assigned 43 normal men to one of four groups: one that received a placebo injection and performed no exercise, another that received a testosterone injection and performed no exercise, another that received a placebo injection and exercised with weights, and a group that received a testosterone injection and exercised with weights. According to the researchers, quote, fat-free mass did not change significantly in the group assigned to placebo but no exercise. The men treated with testosterone but no exercise had an increase of 3.2 kilograms in fat-free mass, and those in the placebo plus exercise group had an increase of 1.9 kilograms. The increase in the testosterone plus exercise group was substantially greater, averaging 6.1 kilograms. The percentage of body fat did not change significantly in any group, close quote. So, the group that got testosterone plus exercise gained 6.1 kilograms of lean mass, almost 13.5 pounds, during the 10-week study, literally triple what someone would get if they trained without the testosterone. While all nutritional scientists would agree on the need for adequate protein in one's diet for all-around health, few would agree with the inordinate emphasis this macronutrient has received from fattists and protein hucksters over the decades for its role in building muscle. Protein has been a best-selling supplement for decades, with most people advised to take it after a workout to allow their muscles to build up bigger and stronger. However, when this prescription was scrutinized more carefully, it was discovered that taking a protein supplement immediately after working out did nothing. And then there is the issue of quality control in the protein supplement industry. Indeed, a recent investigation of several leading protein supplements revealed that many of these protein powders actually lack protein. Certainly, a lack of protein in what is supposed to be a protein supplement should be a red flag for consumers. But what's even more alarming is when one is consuming a bodybuilding supplement that one believes will make them stronger and healthier, only to learn that scientists have now discovered a link between it and testicular cancer. This was the finding of a study that concluded that men who took popular bodybuilding supplements such as creatine or androstenedione were shown to have up to a 177% higher chance of developing testicular cancer, and the risk was worse if they started the supplementation while they were young.
I know bodybuilders have been told for years that because they are indeed bodybuilders and very different from the average person, they need more protein. This is not necessarily true. Keep in mind again that muscle growth on a daily basis is very, very slow. 10 pounds gained in 1 year comes out to less than 12 grams gained per day. That's less than half an ounce of muscle gain per day, and most of that is water. How much extra protein do you think you need to gain 12 grams of muscle a day, most of which is water anyway? Obviously very little. The reason protein has been so overemphasized is because the protein hucksters can't sell you water through the mail. Again, this is where the commercial interests have distorted the true picture of bodybuilding reality.